Hello. So, Insider exposes police chief over anti-Semitism scandal and Tommy Tippy 10 names Robinson. Let's check it out.
Mark Rowley has met with the Israeli ambassador. What came out of those meetings, the perception can be that there's undue influence. It's for him to actually think about whether his position is still tenable.
The head of London's Metropolitan Police has been accused of launching a defamatory attack on pro-Palestine protests.
I can see the effect on Jewish communities, and I am concerned with marches that repeatedly seek to march past synagogues.
This follows an unprecedented political intervention where he criticised the Green Party leader, Zach Polanski, just a week before the recent local elections.
It's a matter for Zach Polanski what he does. Of course, there's always going to be inaccuracies and sort of nonsense on social media. I'm not intervening in politics. He was intervening in operational policing.
Joining me now to discuss this is a police insider, Nusret Mehtab, who rose through the ranks to become one of the most senior female ethnic minority officers in the UK, before quitting over racism and sexism in 2020. Nusret, thanks for joining us. A lot of people will be really appalled to hear Mark Rowley's comments about the Palestine protests. Yeah. Just take us through what he said and what you make of it.
Police officers are bound by the Nolan principles of integrity, objectivity, impartiality and political neutrality. These are not optional. They're not things that you can negotiate. Now, Mark Rowley appears, from some of his commentary, to be sidestepping from the Nolan principles. And, things when he comments on particular marches and his messaging, his language and the repeated commentary can lead to the public perception that is policing really fully detached from politics? No. Is he carving himself a political career? Is he doing the groundwork in terms of going into politics when he leaves his current role?
We've got two protests coming up this weekend. We've got the pro-Palestine rally and we've got the Tommy Robinson demo as well. But Mark Rowley has only spoken out about the Palestine rally.
Yeah, because he's being biased, that's why. He's all for right wing and all of that. He's fine with that. But heaven forbid a group of people get together and shout out against genocide, what Israel are doing currently now to Palestine and Palestinians living within it.
What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, most of his narrative, messaging, public messaging and language has been focused, repeatedly signalling out one protest, which is the anti-genocide protest. And he's made no commentary on the right wing. Now, on Tommy Robinson, the march
because
is there.
He's right wing.
And we know, certainly from...
See, this is exactly when you get it, what you're going to get. Like, people like fighting, just fighting. Fighting people who are peaceful. And then you got people on this side who are just all against it. You want people that are fighting for peace in this world, and you got people on this side that are fighting against those. Disgusting. This is what you're going to get in tomorrow's march for the Tommy Robinson march. This is what you're going to get. Fighting, antisocial behaviour, drinking, drugs, all that stuff that I said in my other video.
From the last march in 2025, some of the rhetoric in that was a hate speech. Some of the rhetoric about Muslims and some of the international speakers that were there.
Islam is our real enemy. We have to get rid of Islam. Islam doesn't belong to Europe. Islam doesn't belong to the UK.
Who's this guy? Philip De Winter, Belgium MP. See, what's his place in the UK then? If he's coming here just to be horrible. Right wing, they all stick together. If he wants to talk about UK politics, become a UK politician.
It was really violent rhetoric, anti-Muslim hate, and it was violent rhetoric.
Spreading hate.
Yet, police chiefs or politicians, they weren't climbing over to make political statements. And the perception can be, based on those that rhetoric, that is he aligning himself to the right wing?
Yes.
Or is it possible that he's carving himself a political career in terms of where he's going in the future?
The organisers of the Palestine rallies have accused him, not just of being defamatory, but of actually lying effectively about what they're doing, because he said that they are deliberately walking past or trying to walk past synagogues, and they've said that's just not true.
No, they're not.
Many of these marches, they set out with an intent to march near synagogues, etc. And
See, it's just like the Hillsborough disaster, where police were lying about Liverpool fans doing really horrible stuff during that awful day. Typical police. They could be so biased at times, depending on the group that they're talking about.
every single time we put conditions on to prevent that. But even that intent causes me concern that they repeatedly ask to do such things. In terms of slogans and chants, I can see many of them are felt sort of viscerally by Jewish communities.
The organisers have all come out and said they want him to retract that, and they've actually put in a formal complaint with MOPAC. But this is all about moving away from blurring the lines of operational policing and political positioning, because then the perception is that security and safety and security is only there for one community, when actually safety and security should be the domain of all communities, whether they're Muslims, Jews, Christians, the black community, LGBTQ+, all communities are concerned about security.
We know that Mark Rowley, along with other senior people at the Metropolitan Police, have had meetings with the Israeli embassy and representatives from the Israeli embassy. Is that normal? And do you think that there is a level of political influence going on?
For commissioners to meet ambassadors is not unusual. Now, it depends on what context. Now, I understand that Mark Rowley actually met with the then Israeli ambassador in 2023, and
When was that? It was in 2023, the 14th of November.
The assistant commissioner met with the then Israeli ambassador in 2024. I think the important thing is that those meetings should be open and transparent, and we should question what was agreed, what was asked, and what came out of those meetings. Otherwise, the perception can be that there's undue influence, because once you put all that into context, so Mark Rowley has met with the Israeli ambassador, then there's context about then there's a commentary on one particular form of demonstration, continuous, repeated, and the Israeli ambassador is a stakeholder in an international conflict, one side of the international conflict, and then Mark Rowley then is commenting on protests related to that conflict in a negative light. The perception can be that, he's aligning to one particular group.
Let's talk about the Golders Green attack. Now, obviously, there's a limit to what we can say because someone has now been arrested. But just talk us through the kind of very basics of what happened that day. Issa
Suleiman, who's the suspect, stabbed a friend of his, a Muslim man, at 8:50 in the morning. I think it was in South London. And then at 11:15, he stabbed.
In the chaos of life, rare moments of quiet are found.
2 members of the Jewish community in Golders Green. Now, after that, he was arrested and he was tasered because he had a knife. It's transpired that he has a history of violence and history.
Yeah, look, anyone who wants to do stuff like that, I don't care who you're doing for whatever reason. Violence against other people just shouldn't happen, and I expect the harshest punishments to be dealt to those people that commit those crimes. That I agree with.
Of mental illness, and he's known to prevent. So he's known to a number of agencies.
Prevent, for people who don't know, do you want to explain what Prevent is?
It's part of counter-terrorism. It's to move people away from extremism, a system in doing that, and people can be referred through various portals to Prevent. And so he was known to all these different agencies, yet I think it was in 2008, he'd actually attacked a police officer stabbed a police officer and somebody else. So there were 2 people stabbed and a police dog. So he's quite violent. Police are aware of him.
When Mark Rowley made a statement about it, he only referred to the 2 Jewish people who had been stabbed. He didn't mention the first man, the Muslim man in South London.
I never
Is there any
knew about
justification for that, do you think? Could he have maybe not known?
Bias.
No,
Of
Mark
course
Rowley
he
would have
knew.
known,
He'd have known.
because when that incident happened and obviously led to subsequent stabbings which are quite high profile, he would have got a briefing on all the facts, and in that briefing he would have known that actually there's 3 victims, not 2 victims. But it's not just Mark Rowley. If you look at the media narrative
Being biased
around it,
again.
and even to date they're referring to 2 stabbings
this is the
of
police chief.
in Golders Green, and there's still no mention of the 3rd man.
No,
Look,
not at all. I didn't know
The
that.
Golders Green attacks were horrific.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism is abhorrent, needs to be condemned and confronted.
Yeah.
Islamophobia, Muslim hate.
Discrimination of any kind, no matter what it is or whatever it is whatsoever, racism, discrimination, whatever, it should be abolished by now. People need to be sensible in this day and age, and we're still struggling with the differences between us all.
Is abhorrent. It needs to be confronted. It needs to be condemned. But there seems to be selective in what's been condemned by politicians. If one inflammatory narrative can be condemned in one context, then it should equally be condemned in another context.
There's also this question about the way that the police officers actually apprehended the Golders Green attacker, the suspect. And obviously, as you said, a horrific attack, and obviously everyone will be relieved that the police did manage to fairly quickly arrest him. But the video shows that this guy was tasered, lying on the floor, and yet police officers were still kicking him repeatedly in the head. Zach Polanski came out and kind of criticised this, but then Mark Rowley kind of accused him of being an armchair critic and of inflaming tensions further. What's your take on it? You know, you've 30 years in the police.
Well, as far as I know, unless that's changed, and I don't think it is, officer safety doesn't teach you to kick somebody in the head.
No.
Now, I can understand the officers' panic because of possibly having a suicide vest,
Then
although I
if
don't
they
know
thought-
whether there was any intelligence to say that. So obviously
Yeah,
the
but if you
questioning
did- if
around
they did think that,
where did
why
they
were they
get
so
that
close?
information is really an important question that we need to ask. But the optics don't look very good, because Zach Polanski, it was absolutely right to question that, because he actually said what a lot of people were thinking, but didn't say it due to the complexities and sensitivities of what were going on. So Zach Polanski was absolutely
And
right
this coming
to do
from
that.
a Jewish man
and
himself.
Mark Rowley did have a number of options. He could have sent Zach Polanski a private messaging, which I think happened later for them to sit down and discuss it.
Let's talk about your
People, I
time
think,
at the
tend to
Met. You were
forget
there
about
for
that Zach
30
Polanski
years.
is Jewish.
During which you experienced a lot of racism and sexism. But how widespread do you think that was and still is?
Well, my experience in policing comes from, not theory, but it comes from my lived experience of having decades of being in the police service. And when I joined, I entered a culture which was overtly racist, misogynistic, and for me, the whole thing is about not individual prejudice and racism, but it was about the institution. It was how the institution chose to ignore what was going on for self-protection and reputation rather than listening to its own people and seeing it. There was a culture of loyalty, there was a culture of power, loyalty, discrimination, and turning a blind eye, if you like, to what was going on. So that's the kind of culture that I walked into.
I guess the question is, I mean, how much do you think that kind of institutional racism then plays into the way that they're handling and speaking about, you know, the pro-Palestine protests, and, you know, do you think that is a factor here?
Well, I think there is a fact. There's patterns, isn't there? If you look at the pattern of how, particularly we're talking about the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, operates, he can't actually admit institutional, to date he hasn't admitted institutional racism despite all the evidence that's been there. And that's just not me saying it as an individual who's had lived experiences. Baroness Casey found institutional racism when she did her review. Shireen Daniels in the 30 Patterns of Harm actually, you know, came up with the same things that are being perpetuated, same patterns that are being perpetuated with policies and procedures. And so Mark Rowley, if he can't even admit institutional racism and can't address the very issues that are blatantly in front of him, and how can he then, in terms of being fair and impartial, take that and police communities impartially?
Did you ever meet him?
When I served in the counter-terrorism unit, because I've had quite a varied career, at that time Mark Rowley was in charge of the counter-terrorism, so we had and then he actually left.
So he was essentially your boss?
Essentially my boss, yeah. So I knew of him, I'd seen him around, but I didn't know him in the sense of sitting down and having a conversation with him.
But he was in the building, essentially, when you were experiencing the racism and the sexism that you experienced?
Yeah, so he was head of counter-terrorism, and myself and others, it wasn't just me, were experiencing racism. And yet I remember him actually saying that he wasn't aware of any racism. So that kind of baffles me, because that just shows me the disconnect maybe between him being head of the counter-terrorism unit and not having a handle on what's going on within his own department.
Some people have said that Mark Rowley should resign over these interventions. What do you make of that?
It's for him to actually think about whether his position is still tenable. I can't see him actually leaving. I think he'll kind of stay there. But I think the people that have asked for him to actually resign were right to do so.
Yeah.
Nusrat, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for watching this video.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 110% agree. I think he should resign. I think he's biased towards one side of the spectrum, and he's promoted another, and that other, unfortunately, is hate and discrimination. So yeah, I think he's totally in the wrong job, and if he does go into politics, I hope he's nowhere near anything that's a thing of power. But yeah, we'll leave it there anyway, and yeah, hit that like and subscribe, and until next time.